I stood in the kitchen with soap bubbles covering my hands while guests laughed in the ballroom above. They saw me as just another servant. Little did they know my husband owned this entire mansion, and I was about to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives. But this wasn't about money. This was about respect, about humanity, about seeing people for who they truly are rather than what they appear to be. My name is Aaliyah, and 2 years ago I married the love of my life, Rafael Costa. Most people in this city know him by reputation only. Whispers in dark corners, careful glances when his name is mentioned, the way conversation stops when he enters a room. Rafael is not a man who built his empire through board meetings and stock portfolios. His world exists in the shadows, where handshakes mean more than contracts and a man's word is worth more than any legal document. He controls things that most people prefer not to think about, moving through the city like smoke, present everywhere but visible only when he chooses to be. What they don't know, what nobody knows except me, is that beneath that carefully controlled exterior lies the kindest, most principled man I've ever met. He has rules, codes he lives by that would surprise most people. Children are sacred. Family is untouchable. A promise given is a promise kept. And perhaps most importantly, everyone deserves respect until they prove they don't deserve it anymore. Maybe that's why we connected so deeply when we first met at a small coffee shop downtown 2 years ago. He was sitting alone in the corner, away from the windows, his back to the wall, just another man in a dark suit, reading a newspaper and drinking espresso. But there was something about the way he held himself, the way his eyes took in everything around him without seeming to look at anything at all. Raphael never flaunted what he had, and neither did I. Even after we married in a small, private ceremony attended by only a handful of people, I preferred to stay out of whatever spotlight existed around him. While he conducted his business in quiet restaurants and private rooms, I was content working at the local animal shelter, doing what I loved without any attention or scrutiny. It was a simple life in many ways, and we both cherished that simplicity. We had an understanding, Raphael and I. His world had darkness in it, yes, but it also had honor. And in my world of rescued animals and second chances, I had learned that nobody is just one thing. But tonight was different. Tonight was the annual charity gala at our home, and Raphael had been planning this event for weeks. The proceeds would go to several children's hospitals across the state, and he was genuinely passionate about making this happen. People who knew his reputation would have been shocked to see how much he cared about those children. Kids who had nothing, who needed everything. But that's who Raphael was. Hard as stone to those who crossed him, soft as silk to those who needed protection. The irony wasn't lost on me that hundreds of wealthy, powerful people would be gathering in our home tonight, and most of them had no idea who I was. Raphael kept me separate from that world intentionally, protecting me from the complications and dangers that came with his name. But tonight, standing in our bedroom, looking at the elegant dress I was supposed to wear, I got an idea. Call it curiosity, call it a social experiment. But I wanted to see how these people really behaved when they thought no one important was watching. I wanted to see their true faces, the ones they showed to people they considered beneath them. So I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to attend the gala, but not as Rafael Costa's wife. I would go as one of the catering staff. I know it sounds reckless, maybe even foolish, but I needed to understand something. These people who came to our home, who would smile and shake my husband's hand, who would speak carefully and respectfully in his presence, how did they treat people they thought had no power? How did they behave when they believed there would be no consequences? I borrowed a simple black uniform from our housekeeper, pulled my hair back into a neat bun, and practiced the invisible expression that service workers learn to wear. Raphael was running late from a meeting, something about a shipment that needed his personal attention, so he had no idea what I was planning. Perfect. The transformation was remarkable. With my hair pulled back, minimal makeup, in the standard server's uniform, I looked like any other member of the staff. I slipped into the kitchen through the service entrance, and none of the catering team questioned my presence. Everyone was too focused on their tasks, too busy preparing for the evening ahead. As the guests began arriving, I grabbed a tray of champagne glasses and made my way into the ballroom. The sight took my breath away, even though I had watched these decorations being arranged all week. Our home had been transformed. The usual warm lighting had been replaced with something more dramatic. Amber glows from carefully placed lamps, creating pools of light and shadow. The chandeliers had been dimmed to create an intimate atmosphere, and fresh flowers in deep reds and whites adorned every surface. It was beautiful in a way that felt both elegant and slightly dangerous, much like Raphael himself. But that sense of pride didn't last long. As I moved through the crowd offering champagne to guests, I started to notice things that made my stomach turn. The way certain people looked right through me as if I didn't exist. The way they would take glasses from my tray without even a glance in my direction, continuing their conversations as if I were nothing more than a piece of furniture. Some didn't even pause their sentences when I approached, simply reaching out blindly for a glass while talking to someone they deemed worthy of their attention. "Excuse me, miss," called out a woman in a bright red dress. Her name was Catherine, and I recognized her from the society pages. She was married to a man who owned several restaurants downtown, places where Raphael occasionally conducted business. "This champagne is too warm. Can't you people do anything right?" I smiled politely and apologized, offering to get her a fresh glass from the kitchen. She rolled her eyes dramatically and turned back to her conversation, dismissing me with a wave of her hand as if shooing away an insect. I bit my tongue and walked away, reminding myself that this was exactly what I wanted to observe. But something cold settled in my chest. This was just the beginning. The real performance started when Priscilla arrived. She was the event organizer, a tall, imposing woman in her 50s, wearing a gold dress that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. Priscilla had built a reputation as the woman who could organize anything, who knew everyone, who could make or break social standing with a single word. She moved through the room like a general inspecting troops, her sharp eyes missing nothing, her mouth set in a permanent expression of dissatisfaction. "You there?" she called out, pointing a perfectly manicured finger in my direction. "What's your name?" "Aaliyah," I replied, keeping my voice steady and neutral. "Well, Aaliyah, I hope you're better at serving than the rest of this amateur staff. Do you see how slowly these appetizers are coming out? It's absolutely unacceptable. This is a high-class event, not some neighborhood gathering. I expect perfection. Do you understand?" I nodded and assured her that I would do my best. But Priscilla wasn't finished with me. Not even close. For the next hour, she found fault with everything I did. The way I carried my tray was wrong. The way I approached guests was too direct or not direct enough. Even the way I stood when I wasn't actively serving someone was apparently incorrect. It was clear she enjoyed having someone to boss around, someone she could dominate without consequence. The other guests seemed to take their cues from Priscilla. If she treated the staff poorly, then it must be acceptable behavior. I watched as perfectly educated, supposedly refined people transformed into something uglier. The veneer of sophistication cracked, revealing the entitled cruelty beneath. "This shrimp is cold," complained a man in an expensive suit, not bothering to look at me. "Don't you people know how to keep food at the proper temperature?" This is embarrassing. I wanted to tell him that he wasn't paying for anything, that this was a charity event, that the money was going to children who desperately needed it. But I held my tongue. Instead, I apologized and offered to get him a fresh plate. He grabbed it from my hands without a word of thanks, turning his back to me before I had even stepped away. As the evening progressed, the treatment got worse. Guests would interrupt me mid-sentence when I was trying to serve them, as if my words literally didn't matter. They made jokes about the staff's intelligence, assuming we couldn't understand their humor, or perhaps not caring if we did. Some made comments about how people like us should be grateful for the work, grateful for the opportunity to serve our betters. The breaking point came when one of the servers called in sick at the last minute. Priscilla was furious, her face flushed with anger at this disruption to her perfectly planned evening. She needed someone to cover the kitchen duties, to keep the dishes flowing and the service running smoothly. And naturally, she chose me. "Aaliyah," she announced, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're going to have to help with the dishes. We're short-staffed, and someone needs to keep the kitchen running. I trust you can handle something that simple." I stared at her for a moment, processing what she was asking. Here I was, standing in my own home, in the mansion that Raphael had chosen specifically because I fell in love with its stone walls and warm spaces, being ordered to wash dishes by a woman who didn't even know she was standing in my ballroom. The absurdity of it was almost beautiful in its own way. I was hired to serve, I said carefully, keeping my voice level. Not to wash dishes. Priscilla's eyes narrowed dangerously. Listen, sweetheart, you'll do whatever I tell you to do. This is a professional event, and I won't have some part-time server questioning my authority. Now get to that kitchen and start cleaning, or you can find yourself another job. Do I make myself clear? The ballroom fell silent around us. Other guests had stopped their conversations to watch the confrontation, drawn by the tension in Priscilla's voice. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting to see how I would respond. Some looked amused, others uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. No one defended me. No one suggested that maybe, just maybe, Priscilla was going too far. I took a deep breath and walked to the kitchen. Not because I was intimidated, not because I was afraid of losing a job I didn't actually have. I walked away because I wanted to see how far this would go. I wanted to see just how cruel people could be when they thought there would be no consequences, when they believed they held all the power. The kitchen was chaos. Plates were piled high in industrial sinks, and the dishwasher was running constantly, steam rising in clouds. I rolled up my sleeves and started washing, my hands quickly becoming raw from the hot water and harsh soap. Through the service window, I could see the guests laughing and dancing in the ballroom, completely oblivious to the work being done to make their evening perfect. They saw the finished product, the beautiful presentation, but they never thought about the hands that created it. But Priscilla wasn't done with me yet. She kept returning to the kitchen, finding new ways to assert her dominance, to remind me of my place in her carefully constructed hierarchy. She criticized my dishwashing technique, complained about the speed of service, and made snide comments about my ability to handle real work. You know, she said during one of her visits, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed. I've been organizing events like this for 20 years. I can spot the troublemakers from a mile away. You have attitude problems, and that's not going to work in this business. People like you need to learn their place. I continued washing dishes, letting her words wash over me like the soapy water. She had no idea that she was talking to the woman who lived in this house, who had personally approved every detail of this event, who could have her banned from every important gathering in the city with a single conversation. But more than that, she had no idea that she was talking to the wife of Rafael Costa, a man who did not forget disrespect, who did not forgive insults to those he loved. The real test of my patience came when Catherine, the woman in the red dress, decided to join Priscilla in the kitchen. She was slightly drunk now, her movements loose and her inhibitions lowered. She leaned against the door frame, looking at me with undisguised contempt. "Oh, this is rich," she laughed, her voice carrying that particular cruelty that comes from too much wine and too little character. "Look at our little server, relegated to dish duty. I bet you never imagined you'd be doing this when you woke up this morning, did you?" I looked up at her, my hands still submerged in soapy water. "Actually, I find honest work quite fulfilling." Catherine's face twisted into something ugly. "Honest work? Is that what you call this? Sweetheart, this isn't honest work. This is what people do when they don't have any other options. This is what people do when they're not smart enough or pretty enough or talented enough to do anything else. This is the bottom of the barrel, and you're scraping it." Her words hit me like a physical blow, not because they hurt me personally, but because I realized she actually believed what she was saying. She genuinely thought that a person's worth was determined by their job title, their bank account, their position in some imaginary social hierarchy. She couldn't conceive of someone choosing service work, choosing to help others, choosing a path that didn't lead to wealth or status. "You know what I think?" Catherine continued, emboldened by my silence and Priscilla's approving nods. "I think you're probably some college dropout who couldn't make it in the real world. I bet you're living paycheck to paycheck, probably can't even afford a decent apartment. You probably share some tiny place with 3 roommates, eating ramen and dreaming about a life you'll never have. People like you are everywhere, a dime a dozen, Completely replaceable. Priscilla laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the kitchen tiles. She's absolutely right. I've seen hundreds of girls like you come and go over the years. No ambition, no drive, no future. This is probably the best job you'll ever have. The closest you'll ever get to this kind of wealth and success. You should be grateful we're even letting you be here. I stood there, my hands dripping with dishwater, and something inside me finally reached its limit. I was done with this experiment. I was done being treated like dirt in my own home. I was done watching these people reveal the ugliness that lived beneath their expensive clothes and practiced smiles. But before I could say anything, before I could drop the act and show them exactly who they had been insulting, I heard a voice that made my heart skip. "Excuse me." The voice was low, controlled, with an edge that anyone who knew Raphael would recognize as dangerous. "Has anyone seen my wife? I'm looking for Aaliyah." My heart skipped a beat. Raphael was here, and from the tone of his voice, he was already suspicious that something was wrong. Priscilla and Catherine exchanged confused glances. They had no idea what was happening, but they could sense that the atmosphere had shifted, that something significant was about to occur. "Your wife?" Priscilla called out, her voice uncertain now, stripped of its earlier confidence. She walked toward the ballroom, Catherine following behind her. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no one here by that name except for one of the servers." I heard Raphael's footsteps approaching the kitchen, the steady, measured pace of a man who was very carefully controlling his anger. I dried my hands on a towel and turned to face the doorway, knowing that the game was about to end, that everything was about to change. Catherine and Priscilla stood frozen in the entrance, their faces confused, their bodies tense. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and calm despite my racing heart, "there is someone here by that name." Raphael appeared in the doorway, and the air in the kitchen seemed to change. He was dressed in a black suit, perfectly tailored, with a dark shirt and no tie. His presence filled the space, commanding attention without any visible effort. His eyes found mine immediately, and I watched as confusion flickered across his face. He took in my uniform, the dishwater on my hands, the industrial kitchen around me. For a moment, he didn't understand what he was seeing. "Aaliyah," he said, his voice soft now, but with an undercurrent that made Priscilla and Catherine take an involuntary step backward. "What are you doing in the kitchen? Why are you dressed like that?" I smiled at my husband, this man who controlled so much of this city's hidden world, who could be so dangerous and yet looked at me with such tenderness. "Hello, darling. I was just getting to know our guests a little better, learning about their true characters." The realization hit Raphael like lightning. I watched as understanding flooded his features, followed by something cold and hard that made even me shiver slightly. He looked at Priscilla and Catherine, who were now pressed against the doorframe as if trying to disappear into the wood itself. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more threat than any shout could have. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said, each word carefully measured. "You've had my wife washing dishes in our own kitchen." Priscilla's face went white as paper. "Your wife?" Her voice cracked on the words. "But she's just a server. She's part of the catering staff. She didn't say anything. She didn't tell us who she was." "No," Raphael said, moving past them to stand beside me. He took my hands in his, looking at the redness from the hot water, the soap still clinging to my skin. "She's Aaliyah Costa, my wife of 2 years and the woman who owns this home as much as I do. She's also one of the kindest, most intelligent people you'll ever have the privilege of meeting, though I suspect you've already destroyed that opportunity." The silence that followed was absolute. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see that other guests had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Catherine's face had gone from red to a sickly, pale green, and Priscilla looked like she might actually faint. The weight of their mistake was settling on them, heavy and inescapable. Raphael turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my wife, Aaliyah." She decided to experience tonight's event from a different perspective, to see how people behave when they think no one important is watching. And I think we've all learned something valuable about human nature tonight. He led me into the ballroom, still holding my hands despite the dishwater and soap. I could see recognition dawning on face after face as guests realized who I was. The woman they had ignored, dismissed, and humiliated was the lady of the house, the wife of a man whose favor they all desperately wanted to maintain. Aaliyah wanted to see how our guests would treat someone they perceived as beneath them. Raphael continued, his voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. I'm disappointed to say that many of you failed that test spectacularly. You revealed something about yourselves tonight. Something ugly that no amount of wealth or social position can hide. Priscilla stumbled forward, her face desperate, her carefully constructed confidence shattered. Mr. Costa, I had no idea. If I had known who she was, I would never have. I was just trying to keep the event running smoothly. I was just doing my job. Exactly, I said, finally finding my full voice. You treated me poorly because you thought I was just a server. But here's the thing, Priscilla. I am just a server tonight. The only difference is that I have the privilege of choice, the luxury of knowing I can walk away whenever I want. The woman who would have been washing those dishes if I hadn't been there. She doesn't have that choice. She deserves the same respect you would give me now, the same basic human dignity you should give to everyone. Catherine tried to slip away into the crowd, but Raphael's voice stopped her cold. Catherine. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. I believe you had some things to say about people like my wife. Something about college dropouts and people without ambition and futures. Catherine froze, her back still turned to us. Slowly she turned around, her face a mask of shame and fear. For the record, Raphael continued, his tone conversational now, but no less dangerous. Aaliyah has a master's degree in social work from Harvard. She chooses to work at an animal shelter because she believes in making a difference, in helping creatures that can't help themselves. She has more education, more compassion, and more strength than most people in this room, including you. He paused, letting his words sink in. As for your husband's business, the restaurants he's so proud of, the ones where he serves expensive food to people who can afford it, let's just say he's going to find things more difficult from now on. My protection, my goodwill, these things are no longer available to him. He'll understand what that means. The ripple effect was immediate. Other guests who had been rude to me throughout the evening began to panic, realizing that their behavior might have consequences they hadn't anticipated. In Raphael's world, respect wasn't just a social nicety. It was currency, it was safety, it was the difference between thriving and merely surviving. Some tried to approach me with apologies, but the words sounded hollow, desperate attempts to undo damage that had already been done. I want everyone to understand something, I said, raising my voice so the entire room could hear. The way you treated me tonight is the way you treat people every day. Your server at restaurants, your housekeeper, your doorman, the person who parks your car or delivers your packages. They all deserve the same respect you would give to anyone else. Their jobs don't make them less valuable as human beings. Their circumstances don't give you the right to treat them as if they're invisible. Raphael squeezed my hand gently. The charity we're supporting tonight helps children who come from all backgrounds. Some of their parents might be servers, dishwashers, cleaners. How can we claim to support these children while looking down on their families? How can we pretend to care about making the world better while treating people like they're beneath us? The evening took on a completely different tone after that. Some guests left early, too embarrassed to stay, unable to meet my eyes or Raphael's. Others approached with what seemed like genuine apologies, and I could see them really thinking about their behavior, really examining what they had revealed about themselves. A few even shared their own stories of times when they had been treated poorly because of their appearance or on their job. Moments of vulnerability that felt real and honest. Priscilla lost everything. Word traveled fast in these circles, faster than any official announcement. By the next day, everyone knew what had happened, and suddenly the woman who had been the most sought-after event organizer in the city couldn't book a children's birthday party. Her reputation, built over 20 years, crumbled in a single evening. She called several times begging to speak with me, to explain, to apologize. I never took her calls. Some lessons need to be permanent. Catherine's husband's restaurants began to struggle within weeks. Not because Raphael did anything obvious, nothing that could be traced back to him directly. But suddenly permits took longer to process. Health inspections became more frequent and more thorough. The best suppliers became unavailable, their schedules mysteriously full, and the clientele, the wealthy, influential people who had made those restaurants successful, they started going elsewhere. In Raphael's world, displeasure doesn't announce itself with threats or violence. It simply makes life quietly, persistently difficult until the message is understood. But the most important change was in the people who genuinely learned from that night. I received dozens of letters from guests who said the experience had made them rethink how they treated service workers, how they viewed people whose jobs they had previously dismissed. Some started volunteering at local charities, working alongside people they might have previously looked down upon. Some made changes in their own businesses, implementing policies that treated all employees with dignity, regardless of their position. These letters meant more to me than any apology could have. As for me, I learned something too. I learned that my privilege comes with responsibility. I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone, to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, to create the kind of change that words alone can't accomplish. And I learned that the most powerful weapon against prejudice and cruelty is simply showing people their own behavior reflected back at them, making them see themselves as others see them. The next morning, Raphael and I sat in our kitchen drinking coffee and reading the news coverage of the event. The story had taken on a life of its own, with people sharing their own experiences of being judged based on appearance or job title. Social media was full of discussions about service workers and respect, about privilege and responsibility, about the masks people wear in public versus who they really are underneath. "Do you regret it?" Raphael asked, looking at me over his coffee cup. His dark eyes were serious, concerned. I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that people need to be taught basic human decency through shock and embarrassment. But I don't regret doing it. Those people needed to see themselves clearly, and sometimes that requires a mirror, even an uncomfortable one." Raphael smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded face. He reached across the table to take my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "You could have revealed who you were the moment someone was rude to you. You could have used your position, boosted my name, to avoid all of that discomfort. But you chose to experience what millions of people experience every day. That takes courage." "That's the thing about privilege," I said, squeezing his hand. "It's not just about having money or status or protection. It's about having choices. I had the choice to walk away from that kitchen whenever I wanted. I had the choice to reveal my identity and stop the mistreatment. Most people in service jobs don't have those choices. They have to smile and endure and hope that the next person will be kinder. I wanted to understand that, even just for one evening." Raphael nodded slowly. "In my world," he said, choosing his words carefully, as he always did when talking about his business, "respect is everything. It's how you survive, how you build something that lasts. But sometimes I think people forget that respect should work in all directions, not just up the chain of power." Last night reminded me of that. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our coffee and watching the morning light fill our kitchen. This room where I had stood washing dishes just hours before, where I had been insulted and dismissed, felt different now. It felt like a place where something important had happened, where a line had been drawn between who we wanted to be and who we refused to become. The charity gala raised more money than any previous year. Ironically, the scandal brought more attention to the cause, and donations poured in from people who had heard the story and wanted to support children's hospitals. Sometimes good can come from uncomfortable moments. Lessons can emerge from conflict, and change can grow from confrontation. This story reminds us that we never truly know who we're talking to, what struggles they've faced, what strength they carry. It reminds us that everyone deserves kindness and respect, not because of what they might be able to do for us, but because they're human beings navigating their own complicated lives. And it reminds us that privilege, real privilege, isn't about what you have or who you know. It's about understanding that you have choices others don't, and using that understanding to make the world a little bit better, a little bit kinder, a little bit more just. Treat everyone with dignity and respect because you never know who you're really talking to. And more importantly, because it's simply the right thing to do, regardless of who's watching or what consequences might follow. The person serving your coffee, cleaning your office, parking your car, they all have stories, dreams, struggles, and worth that has nothing to do with their job title. See them, acknowledge them, treat them as you would want to be treated. That's the lesson I learned in my own kitchen, washing dishes while wearing a borrowed uniform. And it's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.